Welcome to the With You Rugby Podcast, designed to give you an in-depth look at the United States Rugby Foundation, including our grant programs and recipients, fundraisers, events, and much more. Now let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the With You Podcast by the U.S. Rugby Foundation. As we get closer to the Hall of Fame this coming July 19th, sponsored by Major League Rugby, we want to get to know our 2025 class. And I have Kort Schubert here, part of the 2025 class. Congratulations, Kort. And we're going to spend the next hour, 30 minutes, whichever, getting to know you. And so we're really excited on our end. You had a legendary career, and your adoring fans want to know how you got there. So the weekend, by the way, you picked a great year to get into the Hall of Fame. That weekend is going to be fantastic. And as you're aware, the Thursday, July 17, is the 50th anniversary of U.S. Rugby. And then Friday is the Hall of Fame ceremony on the 18th. And then, of course, on the 19th is a doubleheader, both men and women playing. Men have England and the women are playing Fiji, all in Washington, D.C., and the eyes of American rugby will be on you that weekend. So, without further ado, you had an incredible career. You really, you came out of nowhere almost. Boom, went straight up the ladder, stayed at the top for a long, long time. What would have been your early influences? I mean, did you know about rugby growing up in Sacramento? And is that where you grew up, in Sacramento?
Yeah, so thanks, John. I'm glad to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be inducted into the U.S. Rugby Foundation Hall of Fame. My journey started, back in Sacramento, California. Born and raised there. I actually have an older brother, Kort Schubert, who you're familiar with. He's about 10 years older than me. He played rugby at St. Mary's College in Moraga. And so my first taste of rugby was actually watching one of his games. And it could have been against the Bears, but I'm not exactly sure. It was maybe 1990. So had the opportunity to watch my brother Greg, maybe one or two matches throughout his time at St. Mary's, and then kind of took a break from rugby. Wasn't really playing or involved until my junior year of high school, where I started to play for a club called the Ashton Freebooters when I was a junior in high school. So around 16 years old. So that was my first entry into the game.
Now, you were at Jesuit High School, yes?
Yeah, so back in 1996, I guess, and prior, there was no official rugby team at Jesuit High School. So my senior year is when we started the first varsity rugby program at Jesuit High School. Yes, and they've gone on to do extremely well throughout the next 20, 25 years after I left. Bought a national championships, and now I get the opportunity to coach against my former team with the Danville Oaks. So that was the situation in high school, right? The Ashton Freebooters was just a club similar to the Danville Oaks.
Yeah.
Multiple high schools feeding into it and playing in just a sort of Sacramento area league, Northern California rugby. But then my senior year is when Jesuit brought on their own team with the likes of Fred Kasijian, John Shorey,
there you go.
Some big names in Jesuit high school rugby, leading the helm there. That was where I finished Jesuit high school.
Yeah, hey, I mean, in Northern California, but specifically Sacramento, always been a youth and high school powerhouse nationally. It's great to hear you were also a trailblazer there. So, Jesuit is synonymous with big time high school rugby, and I love the fact that you were at the start of that. I did not know that. I thought they were established and brought you on, but you brought them on. So there we go, another feather in your cap there. What other sports were you playing growing up?
So I grew up playing soccer.
Yeah.
I think that was the first sport that I started. Basketball was a really big part of uh, my youth, playing in grade school, all the way up through my sophomore year in high school, actually. So a lot of soccer, a lot of basketball. Started to play flag football in seventh grade.
Yeah.
So played seventh and eighth grade flag football, and then eventually at Jesuit played football for 4 years, basketball for 2 years, and then rugby for 2 years as
What was
well.
your
So,
football position and your soccer position and your basketball position? What were you doing for those teams?
so soccer, I was one of the few left-footed players
Ah,
growing up. So I think I played left midfield, left forward, any position I could take advantage of my left foot. They
yeah.
seemed to put me in. And then in football, I actually started on the offensive line, played some guard freshman and sophomore year, and then became a tight end slash defensive end when I made the move to varsity at Jesuit. And most of my snaps were on defense, on the defensive line. So
Well, your hitting was famous as well, so that's probably why they kept you there. Although you could score tries, and we'll get to that. You scored some famous tries, historic tries in your career, especially at the international level. Um, Jumping then to Cal. So did Coach Clark or Coach Billups recruit you at that or to Cal, or was that just a place you wanted to go on your own?
no, so it was kind of a unique situation, right? Starting rugby at 16, junior year of high school. Primarily played football, wanted to play football in college. So I started to play rugby, kind of fell in love with it during that time. And then my senior year, when Jesuit, brought on the team, my best friend Chris Miller, who's actually the head coach of Granite Bay Rugby right now, he was being heavily recruited by Cal, by Coach Clark, and eventually he came to watch one of Chris's games, which I happened to be playing in. And I was fortunate enough to be seen by Coach Clark,
Hey.
kind of got onto his radar through my best friend Chris. So I owe a lot to him in that sense. But yeah, so that's kind of how it evolved. Got noticed playing for Jesuit, Cal observing, and then Coach Clark taking a liking to me and helping me eventually get into college.
Oh, hey, fantastic school, and obviously their rugby program is what everybody strives to be, and certainly back then they were as good as they are. And congratulations on your championship this year. You got by my
Thank you.
St. Mary's Gales, and I love that game every year. By the way, that I love that game every year. It is fantastic. Um, you didn't waste any time jumping into the international pool at all either. So did you start at the U19 level?
Yeah, so went to Cal, right, freshman year, kind of got initiated into the program. Ended up winning a national championship against Stanford that year. I think I came off the bench in that first national championship there. Um, and then sort of played another season. Sorry, take a step back. After that first season, right, I did get the opportunity to play with the under 19 national team. So I guess some of the players are high school players, others are sort of freshmen, depending on what age you are going into college. So yeah, played with a lot of fellow teammates at Cal. On that team, we toured New Zealand. I think it was a 4-week tour, 3-4 week tour to New Zealand. One of the best experiences of my rugby career. That first kind of taste of international rugby
Yeah.
in New Zealand. I really saw a difference in my individual skill and my level of play prior to that tour, and then coming back from that tour, I saw a huge improvement. Just playing five or six matches against some of the best youth rugby players in New Zealand.
Yeah.
was a huge opportunity for me. I mean, I'm just, a few years into the game, learning still, kind of understanding how it's played outside the U.S. And so that opportunity in New Zealand really catapulted my career and my growth as a player for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to show that obviously the U.S. has the athletes, and as soon as we get the exposure, we'll do well. And you saw on the other side of the field all these future, I'm sure, future All Blacks coming at you, and wow, what a great way to get indoctrinated in your international career. So then,
Yeah.
it's on to the Eagles. Why not? Just keep on going up.
Yeah, so I mean, I was fortunate enough to be at Cal, right, where Jack Clark was the head coach of the national team. Um, sort of prior to that time, prior to me joining the national team. So I had exposure to him, and of course, Coach Tom Billups had a huge impact in my career, not only at Cal but with the Eagles.
Yeah.
So yeah, I owe a debt of gratitude to both those men, especially Coach Billups, who eventually appointed me captain of the national team, and we shared a lot of exciting moments on and off the field.
And so, were you playing with Coach Clark and Coach Billups as the men's national team coach?
No, so Coach Clark was the head coach up until I think 1999, right after the World Cup.
Yeah.
And so I came in 2000, and that summer, Duncan Hall, an Australian,
That's right.
was appointed head coach at that time. And then after a few matches, or I think he had a couple seasons, then Coach Billups took over, right after Duncan Hall, his tenure ended. So I didn't have the opportunity to play for Coach Clark on the national team, but definitely Coach Phillips was head coach throughout the core of my time.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure Coach Clark obviously he had a tremendous influence on your ability. And again, your ability, they could stick you anywhere. You played the entire back row, not by yourself, but it's
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to kind of gravitate towards flanker. 6'7", number 8 was actually my preferred position, and then eventually played some lock as I played overseas. But yeah, I think it's a natural sort of transition from sort of a defensive end linebacker position to a flanker.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of those skills and attributes playing football, that transferred to being successful at rugby. So I was fortunate there.
Yeah, and again, you from defensive end to scoring tries in World Cups. Wow. So
Yeah.
2000, yeah. Talk to us about that experience. I mean, a World Cup is the pinnacle of every athlete's career.
Yeah. One of the best times of my my rugby journey was that period, building up to the World Cup in 2003. We played South Africa in 2001, which was sort of my first taste of Tier 1 rugby. At the highest level, right? So, that was a great opportunity to play against, some of the best in the world. And actually, we held our own for the most part in that match. Score line doesn't really show, but I think that match kind of, showed me that I could play with, whoever it was in the world, right? I could hold my own, coming from this American player, kind of rushed into the game, late 16, and then, being able to make it to Berkeley, then to the national team, and then playing the likes of South Africa, after only 5 years playing the game was a pretty cool thing to experience. And then that sort of took me through to the 2003 World Cup in Australia. Really good team. It took us a lot to get there, right? We had to go through a lot of qualifications, repechage, all of that, experience to eventually get to the World Cup. And then, had some good moments in that tournament. scored 3 tries, right? I think that experience,
That'll do.
that opportunity kind of helped me get to where I eventually got overseas.
Yeah.
So really big tournament. Um, I spent a lot of time in Australia after that tournament, so traveled, really took advantage of the culture, and sort of immersed myself in that culture, and it kind of led me to having success,
Yeah.
down the line.
Yeah. So we've touched on Coach Clark, Coach Hall, Coach Phillips, uh, obviously legendary coaches in U.S. history. Were there any teammates that really you bonded with, or maybe you looked up to? You were a young kid coming into this. Was there anyone that kind of took you under the wing and said, "Son, here's how we do it"? Anything like that?
Yeah. So coming in as a 20-year-old kid, um, I did look to the likes of the Dan Lyles, the
Yeah.
David Hodges, the Luke Grosses, the Kevin Delzells. Those were sort of the players that were established, not only in the U.S. but over in Europe, and kind of showed me the path that I eventually took. Myself seeking to play in Europe as well, but really appreciate the mentorship, the experiences I had with those players, and a lot more. But being in the same position, Dan Lyle and Dave Hodges were kind of really instrumental in sort of helping shape me as a player. Just their skill levels, their physicality, they kind of brought an all around type level of skill to their position, and kind of owning it for a number of years, right?
Yeah.
But legendary players in their own rights, and I'm extremely fortunate to kind of have been brought in at a time when they were kind of at the peaks of their careers. So really owe a lot to those guys.
Yeah. And I'm sure lifelong friends. You still keep up with a lot of the guys from those World Cup days?
Yeah, so I still stay in contact with a few of the boys. David Fee was a good mate of mine throughout that. Still keep in contact with him. Mike McDonald,
Yeah.
another
Oh
longtime
man.
national team player. And then my best friend Chris, he also played a few games for the Eagles. So yeah, I just try to stay in touch with as many of the guys as I can. I know it's tough. We all got our lives, our families, our careers, right? But always good to make connections with those guys. Still even 10
Yeah.
years
What?
out.
So then you go over and you're playing overseas professionally. That's obviously fantastic. What were some of the highlights there?
Yeah, so it kind of was a challenge getting overseas initially after that World Cup, right? I had a good amount of success as an American player, right, on the world stage. Performed well over those 4 matches in the World Cup, and then kind of put my name out there, trying to get any opportunity I could to, play outside the U.S., right?
Yeah.
So we looked in England, we looked in France, um, and we eventually were able to secure an opportunity with Northampton Saints and head coach Wayne Smith. That was an awesome opportunity. I didn't spend a lot of time there. I think it was 4 or 5 months, um, but I got thrown in, got exposure to Wayne Smith and his coaching style. Um, all these professionals, right? Not only from England but other countries. There were some New Zealand players, maybe some Australians, but just a kind of a great eye-opening moment, just to see what a professional environment looked like.
Yeah.
Live on my own, kind of lived with a couple teammates, played primarily for the kind of the second side for Northampton. Um,
Okay.
at that time, they had a rule around foreigners
Yeah.
actually on the field. I believe it was maybe
Yeah.
two foreigners on the field, and one of the highlights of that experience was actually performing really well in a couple of those Northampton A games, right? The second side matches, and having Wayne Smith actually sit me down and tell me that if I wasn't American or if I had a passport, I would be playing for the first side,
Oh,
right? So, that's something I always kind of remember and reflect on at that time because I was working hard, I was having good performances, but not having a European passport limited my ability to actually participate or perform on the top team there. But it was good to get that reassurance from Coach
yeah.
Smith, letting me know that I had performed well enough to play, but sort of my passport status was keeping me out.
There you go. So is when that happens, and this is really for, informational, do clubs then try to you move to Cardiff? Was that to get more playing time? Was that something that Northampton said, you are good enough, we can't play you, let's try and move you and get something? How did the business aspect of it, the back end? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think Northampton, the situation there, I was in sort of a developmental type contract, right? I wasn't necessarily brought in to play on the first team, right? I think I had an agent at that time, and they were seeking opportunities for me, at some of the Division 1 teams in England. And then the Premiership was always going to be tough, right, with that two foreigner rule.
Yeah.
So I just took the opportunity that was presented to me to get over to Europe, right? To get established in any sort of professional environment, right? Where I was playing rugby every day, I was training, I was living the life, right? And then, when that time ended, I didn't necessarily, think I would sign for Northampton or another Premiership team in England, right? So I kind of went back to the drawing board with my agent. We sought out any other opportunities
Yeah.
in Europe, and eventually landed on Cardiff, and Dai Young was the head coach at that time. They had a need for a back row player, number 8, and I had a pretty good showing at Northampton, and then throughout the U.S. test matches, building up to that time at Cardiff. So I was eventually given the opportunity to sign a full contract at Cardiff as a foreign player, right? As an
Yeah.
American, but I
That's
think the
a big deal.
rules, yeah, the rules there, they could have been different, or I'm not exactly sure, but I was able to step right in, and I think I played pretty much every match I was healthy for that first year at Cardiff. So
Oh, that's great. Well, I'll tell you, your health and your match streaks were also part of the Eagle lore. Was it 42 consecutive matches or something unfathomable for the U.S.? 17 as captain.
yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty cool to think about
Yeah.
that many games in a row. I guess it just kind of speaks to the way I played the game, right? I was never the most physical or the biggest, hardest hitter, but I knew how to play the game at a high level,
That's
and avoid injury.
there
Let's
you
just say
go.
that.
Well, I'll tell
Um,
you what. I think if we had people on the other side of the line and saying that you didn't play hard, I think we'll get an argument or two.
yeah,
It is hilarious. No, you played hard. You played right. But
thank
that
you.
probably goes all the way back to all the great coaching that you had. You did everything correctly, which helps the body and avoid injury. Obviously, all luck is always a good thing. But if you're doing it right and you're training well, you play, and that's those are just phenomenal streaks to for anybody. My goodness,
Thank you.
especially an American. Um, so we're getting on towards the end of the career. You're the great beard, if you will, on the team. Um, what's that like now? People are coming in and they're saying, "Oh my God, there's Schubert. Oh wow, there's Schubert." And so how does that different from when you first came on and you're saying, "Oh my God, there's Dan Lyle," that type of thing.
Yeah, so I missed out on the 2007 World Cup, right? due to injuries and other factors.
As we talk about your streaks, right?
Yeah, right. So I eventually got hurt, and that there was a series of injuries that led me to not re-sign with Cardiff and come back home to the U.S. And then I took a certain amount of time off away from the national team, and maybe thought my career maybe was over, right? But then Scott Johnson came in, kind of identified some of the older experienced players that were still in the fight, and I was given another opportunity to come put on the red, white, and blue, and play for the national team. I think I finished 2 matches after that hiatus, with eventually my last game being against Canada in 2009 or 2008. 8. Yeah. So I guess it was a different position to be in, being the older, experienced player with international experience outside the U.S., right, for professional clubs at that time. So I think I embraced that. I enjoy coaching and teaching the game, and helping those players who are just picking up the game, or are getting better each day, playing the game. I thrive in those environments, and I imagine that was how it was. It was a short-lived couple games, right, in 2008, but there definitely were some players on that team that were, just getting started in their careers, and so it'd be nice to hear maybe if they had anything to say about their experience with me.
We'll do a follow-up.
Yeah, they may be in the Hall of Fame at some point, so.
Right? And they'll say, if it wasn't for Schubert, I never would have made it. That's it.
That's doubtful.
Did you know when to hang up the boots internationally? That's a tough thing for any athlete to know. So was there a moment at all, or oh my God, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah, I remember that week building up to that final match versus Canada. We had, as you do, we had a couple, double days, trainings those days. And I just remember, I had some ongoing lingering knee issues, right? So, I was playing through a lot of pain. And I just remember those double days just being really hard on me and on my knees. And, I was kind of battling through each session to get through them. And, everything seemed to be fine on game day, but just what it took throughout the week, right? The preparation, being on your feet and, pounding those joints throughout that, build up to that final match. I knew that, I think I had reached the end with my knee, and, wouldn't be able to continue to train that hard and play that hard, going forward. So it was a pretty simple decision.
You had a standard, and that's it. When you can't reach that standard that you set for yourself, that's it. Yeah. Adrenaline is a wonderful thing. It comes on Saturday and you just go, hey, look, there's a wall. I'm going to run through it.
Adrenaline and Advil.
Yeah, there it is. Good combo there. So after all that, you come back. Did you continue playing club ball for a while? You were in on the Olympic club? Is your club?
Yeah. So I didn't want to step away from the game altogether, right?
Oh.
I enjoyed so much of the game and the team aspect and the camaraderie, and just enjoying those moments with teammates, that I continued to play with the Olympic club for another few more years. I guess the standard of Olympic club was a little bit less than the Eagles, so I was able to to continue kind of 2 trainings a week and a game on Saturday. For the next few years, until I think I ended up stopping playing, just probably further knee injury, and I think my son was on the way at that point. So That's kind of what led me to eventually hang him up for good.
Yeah, you go to the Olympic Club for the golf course instead of the rugby at that point.
Yeah.
So, a career after sports, you've given your life to sports. What was next for Kort Schubert? Um, just jump into business? Did you stick with coaching straight away?
Yeah. So like a lot of former athletes, right? It was a challenge for me to kind of make that jump.
Yeah.
You know, it'd been a while since I'd, graduated Cal, right? So I did have a degree, right, which I utilized to eventually get a job with a former Cal rugby player, football player, Don James,
DJ.
DJ, right? He gave me the opportunity to kind of get some work experience, right? He owned a IT reselling company at the time,
Was that Bearcom?
and Bear Data,
Bear
Bear
Data.
Data Systems
Yeah, that's right.
was my first job post rugby. I owe a lot to DJ. He gave me the opportunity, and kind of just used that to get some career experience, right? Build out a resume, and eventually use that experience to get some experience in medical device sales, which
Oh,
I'm
very good.
now currently doing.
Oh,
So
excellent, excellent.
yeah,
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I remember seeing the DJ's signs on Highway 5 actually when I was going back up to the Bay Area from San Diego. Like, hey, I know that guy.
yeah.
That,
There's a lot of adopt a highway signs
yeah, there you
on my
go.
Bear
He,
Data.
he's in there. So you did go back to coaching. Tell us, was it just you couldn't get the game out of you? You had to get back in, or did someone say, I know a guy?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of looked to what was familiar initially, right? In in that sense, right? I reached out to all, Cal alumni that I knew, and DJ eventually gave me a job, but I also wanted to stay close to the game, and I
Yeah.
knew Cal was right there. So I did get the opportunity to, be an assistant coach with the Bears for a couple seasons with Matt Sherman as well, head coach of Army.
Yeah.
Now we spent a couple seasons as assistants together uh, at the university, and yeah, I mean it was a great learning experience. My first taste of really real coaching, right? Seeing the other side of the game, having played 5 seasons with the Bears, coming back and kind of just learning how to be a coach, right? Learning how to
Yeah.
teach the game
Yeah.
is a lot different than playing the game. So I cut my teeth there for a few years under Coach Clark and Coach Phillips, and then I took a break right from coaching, continued to play, but really shifted more focus towards career and family, and had my son in 2012. And then, made my way outside of San Francisco back to the East Bay area where I found the Danville Oaks.
Yeah.
And that's where
You're
I
representing. I see you
yeah,
representing.
representing
There
now.
you
And
go.
that's where I currently coach. And I think I started there in 2015 as an assistant on the junior varsity. Um, and yeah, it's been a great ride.
So, do you just have the one son?
I have a son and a daughter.
Hey,
My son Chase is 12, plays under 12s for the Danville Oaks, and
there you go.
my daughter Sloan is 9. We're
Nice.
trying to get her out onto the rugby field,
Yeah.
hoping she'll make the move here soon.
So, how big is youth rugby in your area? It's obviously something near and dear to the U.S. Rugby Foundation, and one of the things we focus on, obviously. But Bay Area, youth rugby, uh, huge, yeah.
Yeah, so when I first started playing in Sacramento, there were really no opportunities outside of high school, right?
Right.
No middle school, no under 12s, no youth rugby. But now, right, fast forward, you know, 25 years, and the the Danville Oaks now have the ability, or now field teams at the under 8 level, under 10s, under 12s, middle school, and then, finally high school. So it's definitely evolved over the years. Bringing in younger and younger players, getting them exposed to the game,
Yeah.
is only great for the game, right? In the development.
And yeah, I mean, you guys, you've been around. Danville's been around a long time. Another powerhouse like La Marinda up there. I mean, do you have rivalries? And you can introduce your kids to rivalries.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's a highly competitive league here in Northern California. The Premier League, and there's a few other divisions below that. But now we're seeing the single school kind of programs, grow and start to see them attract more different types of players, right? Those that may not get exposed at the club level, their high schools are now starting to bring on teams, right? So it's only a positive for the game and the growth, as we build into the World Cup here in a few years.
Yeah, hosting. Well, we've got one, and then we're hosting a couple. So I mean, it's nothing.
The hosting, yeah.
Oh my goodness, to be a young player right now, it would be phenomenal, both the men and the women. This will not be your first Hall of Fame.
No, so I was fortunate enough to be inducted into the UC Berkeley Athletic Hall of Fame a few years back. Tremendous, honor. Grateful for that opportunity. So many, athletes, rugby players, having been inducted into that Hall of Fame, right? But yeah, it was kind of surreal, right, to be inducted with the likes of Marshawn Lynch, and a few other, big name football players, right? So I enjoyed that experience. I'm looking forward to the events in DC here in July.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's going to be a fantastic weekend, as we talked about earlier. I was thinking back, to be a rugby player at Cal, and then to get into the Hall of Fame there, because rugby has been an integral part of that school's athletic life. 100+ years. That is tremendous. But we do have another Hall of Fame for you coming in July at the Mayflower Hotel in DC. It's going to be an incredible weekend with the doubleheader, as we talked about, the 50th gala for U.S. Rugby. Again, because you made great decisions all your career, you made another great decision by getting elected on this year. I want to thank you for your time today. It was great to get to know you. I learned a lot. I'm sure your fans have learned a lot, and we look forward to seeing you around the pitch as a coach, as a player, as a legend, as a Hall of Famer.
Thank you, John. Appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to everything that Hall of Fame weekend entails. Excited, grateful, just looking forward to it.
Great. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers.